So I'm Peter Ziegler. I work for McLarens Loss Adjusters. I've been a loss adjuster for 35 years and I'm a UK chartered loss adjuster. I worked in New Zealand, covered losses in the Pacific Islands, Australia, and on one great occasion I got sent to the UK to inspect leaky wine cask taps. That wasn't too bad at all. The jobs that I've done, just a little ounce of credibility perhaps, is Lyttelton Port, Centreport, which were significant earthquake claims, both of them close to $500 million each, and Transmission Gully been involved with. I'm fortunate that I think it's a great job and I get to meet people who are pretty much aspirational. It's lots of small businesses and bigger who strive to do the best they can. They create employment and opportunities for other people along the way. I think we've lost a little bit of that over recent years and I hope we can recapture it. And I meet people in times of adversity and it's how they react to that that is just so, it's quite inspiring. And it's not meant corny, it is. It's very inspiring to see what they do. And also how their competitors can rally around and assist them through that process. No one wants to see anyone go to the wall and they all assist each other. So I'm very fortunate in what I do. At the outset, when I'm meeting someone or there are Teams calls or whatever the case may be, there's a couple of little things I do to prepare myself for the meeting that I'll share. It's not unique to loss adjusting, it's just unique to me. I'll write on my piece of paper my dog's name, Bowie. So we can be in the meeting, can be a little tense at times. I'll glance down and see my dog's name. If you've got a dog, you automatically smile when you see your dog's name. It's great. My overarching commitment in the meeting is dignity. Dignity to the people that are in the meeting with me, but also dignity to myself. So it's important that I have that at the forefront of my mind all the way through the process. Space, I use space. Space can be a pause, it can be a second, it can be a minute, it can be a week, a day, it can be long time. But I use space and it's all relative between the initiation to the reaction. You have the control of that space and it's how you use that. Also, there's a Buddhist saying that put things through a filter before you say it. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? I cringe with kind these days because it was taken by someone else and destroyed for me, but I still write it down. And my last one is ego. Is my ego getting in the way of making this work properly? So what is the role of the loss adjuster? Let's see if Peter can work this. True. So our overarching role is to support you for your full policy entitlement. No more, no less. We should be looking at ways of you being covered. You have a range of covers. There's often areas of grey. We should be assisting you to find the homes that it sits in appropriately. We're not there to shortcut you, to shortcut you. And the insurers make the decisions, it's their money and they make the decisions, but our role is to point it out to them. That's where we believe it sits. Ultimately, the decision is theirs. At the very outset, it's really important to get the policy details from the insurer and or the broker. And even though the brokers aren't here, they're a very, very important part of your program. And I'd encourage you to make sure you have brokers that you get on well with, that are there to advocate for you and support you through the claims if you require them. And you'll find they make a significant difference. So who is insured under the policy? Who can make a claim? Here I'm going to tell a little war story about an interested party that wrote Contract Works claim, and they wrote to me and they said, we have an interest in this loss, please pay the proceeds of the claim to a trust account, a solicitor's trust account. We'd already checked the policy details, and it's the first we'd heard of this person or this interested party. So we went back to the principal and the main contractor and said, who is this person? And the principal said, Joe Whanakapang, he's funding us through this exercise. We believe he's right that he has an interest in it. We went back to the insurance company and said, what else do you have that you haven't already provided? They rummaged around and they found that in actual fact they had named Joe Whanakapang as an interested party under the policy. So what that meant was that when it comes to claim settlement, that person's interest has to be noted as well. They have to sign up and agree to a settlement. And between the parties, they have to agree where the funds are going to be distributed to and how they're going to be distributed. That can lead to tensions along the way. A little bit later, we had another party write to us on the same claim saying, Joe Bloggs here, I have a financial interest. And this came through the principal. And we said, okay, we knew about Joe Whanakapang, we didn't know about Joe Bloggs. Can you give us a little bit more information? And they made some inquiries and they came back and said, just ignore that. Disregard that correspondence. That person had no interest in the claim and therefore it shouldn't have come through to you. This is just a way of letting you know of some of the things that we face along the way and how it marries up to your insurance. That was the same claim where the main contractor had said, I don't want to make a claim under the policy. I think the loss is not significant. The principal, who was named on the policy, said, I differ. I want to make a claim. The principal was entitled to and made a $6 million claim. Just a little bit of difference between the main contractor and the principal in there. The schedule. It's not just the policy wording, but also the policy schedule, which details things such as the policy period and has it been renewed, has it run into the next period if required. What is the insured project, or is it an annual policy that has a group coverage for you for a 12-month period subject to declarations? Does it tell us the contract site or is it all sites? And sums insured include sublimits such as expediting expenses, which can include air and sea freight. Can also include penal rates. There are some more refined areas around that, but generally that's what it provides for. What about asbestos sublimits? And we're not just talking about the tipping fee extra, but you will have extra PPE gear involved in that you wouldn't ordinarily have for demolition or removal of debris. You'll have a slower process invariably because you're all PP'd up for a start. So there's an extra cost there. And overall, what is that cost difference between if it had been a non-asbestos site versus an asbestos contaminated site? And what is the limit? Making sure that you have adequate insurance there. Removal of debris, you heard earlier Chris commenting about that. Some of the wordings are quite wide-ranging and bring in that area areas like temporary repairs and make safe to the site. I'd encourage you to look at those because they're very important. But then I don't know how much you have to look at before you have an insurance claim, because otherwise you do nothing. Increased costs during construction. We've already heard about the importance of the inflationary provision there. Protection costs is another area. You can get storage off-site as a specific sum insured. Advanced loss of profits, which I'll come back to a little later. Delay in startup. Additional costs. There are a wide range of policy wordings, and they can be very different. They can be bespoke to the project, and you've had lawyers crawling all over them and piecing them together along with the professionals in the industries. You can have it generic to an insurer. You can have it generic to a broker. You can have a broker has different wordings with different insurers. You can have broker wording today that's a different one in 6 months' time, and it depends which period the policy, the loss falls into in the period of cover as to which may apply. One of the things we also need to do along the way is confirm the identity of all the involved parties and their relationships to one another, whether it be architects, engineers, project managers, who engaged them, what was their role, subcontractors and subcontractors, and their respective activities. And then may have to go through the contractual chain to see who has insurance and what their specific requirements are between the contracting parties, or are they all embraced under the master policy. Clearly we need to understand about the project itself and the background to it, its commencement date, how it's tracking and its progress, its anticipated completion date, what are the hurdles currently being faced, whether it be port delays because there's a cyber problem over in Australia and you can't get materials over. We need to understand all of those, and they're even more important for where you have financial losses insured. Again, the advanced loss of profits, delay in startup, and or additional costs cover. If you do have those, then we need to understand the program review. The program review, depending on the size of the project, can be long, because you might have a rain event that's insured, you may have other contributing delays along the way, and you're trying to associate what the delays are due solely to the insured weather event, as opposed to other delays that are not insured, which we'll come back to a little earlier about the experts that we may need to call on to assist us with that. We need to do a walkthrough and become familiar with the site. Often it's a lot more than just one walkthrough because there's lots of things often to see, and as it progresses there'll be additional damage that wasn't clearly apparent at the time when we were first involved. Presto. Sorry. I think that's where we're up to. Inspection and photographing the damage, so we've got a record of it, so you've got a record of it that we can tie it into. And I'll give you an example. We were given a notification about a claim. The event occurred 18 months earlier. The reinstatement of the works had been completed. There's nothing to see. So we went through, gathered the information that was available, and said what we would expect to see is, because it was a weather event, weather records, the site photographs of the time taken by people on the site, correspondence with the civil works contractor, the engineer to the project's contribution at that time, the scope of damage, the scope of repair, and detailed costs to reinstate it to the same pre-loss condition. Now, under this particular one, the challenge that we had was the project engineer referred to a specific consecutive 3-day period of rainfall that caused the damage. The civil works contractor agreed with that, but then said there were also potentially 6 other events that contributed beyond that period of time for the damage. Bearing in mind we didn't have the opportunity to see it at the time because of the late notification, and we're trying to piece the records together to say how many events are involved. Policy excess or deductible comes into the equation there. So that can make it a little bit more cumbersome. Identifying potential environmental and health and safety issues and the responses to that. Environmental sedimentary ponds, is that right, ESPs? And where they're being created to look after the natural wildlife, and where there has been damage and it's got into those areas and into surrounding creek areas, and the costs involved to prevent further damage but actually restore the wildlife and to, what's the right word, nurture it, care for it, came up.
They can also trigger RMA prosecutions as well.
Yes, let's not scare everyone with that. You can do the legal thing. It's hard enough to keep them awake with insurance. One of the key elements, of course, is determining the cause. I'll talk a little bit later about the policy about being sudden and unforeseen, but often it's needed to determine if it's a design or a workmanship issue, or storm or fire. And what is the impact from the policy? It may not meet the cost to rectify the defective workmanship or the design. And if the design is changed and there's an additional cost to do something different, may not be covered. But it may cover resultant damage. There's lots of mays in here, and the reason being they are bespoke wordings and they're all a little bit different, and it's hard to give you a hard and fast because there'll always be an exception to the rule. Which is why, as a loss adjuster, I spend an awful lot of time looking at what's been provided to me by you, and then looking at how the policy reacts to that, and then going back to the contract and seeing what the intent was. There is a policy I can think of that will pay for the defective workmanship and defective design up to a certain limit, but generally speaking, they won't pay for the rectification of that damage. Rectification of the defect as opposed to actual damage. They'll pay for the damage. I think one of the things that, from our perspective, we need to understand, we need to appreciate, you're the experts in what you do. It's your site. You know what's going on. You know how it was built. You know the challenges you've had along the way. So we should be there to listen to you. And based on our experience, we may have some questions or some comments. So we just need to understand a lot more about where you're at. So what are the steps that should be taken to make it safe, to secure it? At all times, you should act as though you're uninsured, because you'll be prudent in the way you operate, and the insurance policies do normally require that you must take mitigating action to ensure that you don't increase the loss. Those aren't the exact words. Hurrah. Again, you'll know more about the demo, the debris removal, the remediation, time sensitivity, the factors that are going to influence your decision making and the way that you respond to this. Again, we should be helping you with that by saying, yes, that appears to be an insured item, or we'll need to get some instruction from the insurers on that, or perhaps that's not considered to be covered under the policy. Work with your broker to canvass those things when they arise. Going back to the actual contractual arrangements about insurance in the first place. We need to understand what the contract says, what the requirements were. We need to reconcile any differences and how they arose. In the ideal world, you meet with your broker, you provide the information, you get insurance, you get the schedule, you get the wording, and it all accurately reflects everything that's gone along the way to be agreed. It's not always like that. As I said with the interested party earlier, sometimes paperwork hasn't gone through, someone's got it wrong somewhere, so it's not always the perfect world, but it's something that it's important for us. There should be no surprises. We should be working with you and your broker and saying, look, this is what we've provided. There seems to be a gap. Can someone give us a clue here where we should be looking or what more can be done? Again, who's got the responsibility to insure? Who are the named insured parties in there? Could there be dual insurance? So some large organisations, predominantly large organisations, and they may or may not be international. We have them locally as well. They may do a lot of construction work in their business through the year. They're not a builder, but they just have lots of properties as an example. And it may well be that they have under what we call their material damage policy, the more bricks and mortar type policy, they have an extension in there that says you've got contract works cover up to a certain limit. Could be $1 million as an example, could be more. And sometimes they will ask them to declare those works at the end of the policy period, and they'll charge them a premium for it for the next year going forward. Tell us what you did last year, and there might be a reconciliation. Tell us what you're thinking is going to happen next year so that they can budget that into it. In the meantime, they may have entered into a contract with someone to do some work for them and requires that party to insure the works. It does happen, it probably shouldn't, because it would usually be an existing structure which the onus would then fall onto the principal as opposed to the main contractor. But it does happen, and then you end up with different insured parties, potentially different insured parties, and two different policies and different wordings, and how we work our way through that. It can be challenging, but at least there is insurance. With regards to recovery prospects, the insurers have the opportunity, when they've agreed your claim is enforceable, to have subrogated rights that they can take action against another party who is at fault, and presumably it would pass on to their insurer and seek to recover those costs. And that can lead to strains, and I'm sure many of you have probably experienced it, where let's assume a subcontractor has caused some damage. There's tension because the subcontractor has gone to their liability insurer and said, the main contractor said, I'm liable for this, I've caused the damage. To lay down misere, they're being told by their insurers, don't acknowledge liability, leave it with us, trust us, we know what we're doing, and they'll pass it over to a lawyer over there and life is over. No, I shouldn't say that because it's being recorded, isn't it? And so it does create tensions along the way. What we should be aware of is how we can work with those commercial relationships with you. We should be asking or saying to you, tell us what are the pressure points for you with this particular aspect, with a recovery going on, how can we work that through together? Sometimes it'll be limited what we can do, but it's certainly an area that we have to explore. Is there the option for the insurers, our contract works insurer, and then how can we achieve that outcome? It's important for us to get pre-loss reports. If there's specialist consultants involved, it'll help give us a better understanding, so I'll go back a step, on more unique areas it can help us because we're not the know-all. You guys are pushing the boundaries of building, and if you've got experts involved, coding experts as an example, then the more we know, the better we can understand, the better that we can agree the solution with you so that the insurers can understand that. Tender documents, quotes, etc., showing original costings. This is to give us a benchmark. You've had damage, we've agreed the scope of damage, you're now going to reinstate the damage. We need to know that the cost that you're putting forward now is consistent with your contract and the agreement that you had in place. And separately, the inflationary provisions can come into it as well. The scope of damage is probably the key component. The sooner it's agreed at the outset, the better it is for everyone, because you can then move on. Even if it can't be agreed, if there's a good enough record of the damage and there's others involved assisting in determining what that scope of damage is, then you can still move forward with the contract. We should not be there telling you not to do things. We should be explaining to you there might be a lag for a certain thing, or agreeing what needs to be done to demonstrate the actual damage, but we shouldn't be an obstacle to you. You need to understand how you're going to do the reinstatement and how you're going to record the costs so that we can then in turn review it. All we want to do is be able to have agreed with you the scope of damage, what the costs are going to be, here's some funds, and we'll come back to that. What we do need to understand, it was a comment made earlier about betterment or a change. So there's an enhancement in the reinstatement process above and beyond what was originally constructed. You're entitled to have it back the way it was. If there's an enhancement, it's someone else's bill to pay for the value of the enhancement. It's also, if there's change to the program, and it may well be that there is damage here and you decide that you're going to change your program because long term your financial losses will be less if you change the program than if you just fixed this first and then went back to the original program. We need to know that the program change is your election. Invariably that's what we call a consequential loss, and the additional cost of changing your program is at your cost. But the cost of fixing that actual damage hasn't changed. That is paid by the insurer. Cost escalation. I would have thought in today's times now that you'd all be very well placed to record what your original tender and your quotes were, and as you've tracked along and what the changes may have been since then as a result of the damage, and there's a cost escalation. As long as we can understand it and support it. Independent consultants. I'm not an expert in the construction industry, and I need help and the insurers need help to understand things, and it may well be that it's just a unique skill set for the types of project that's affected. It might be a capacity issue, that we get someone else and they've got more capacity, better timeliness. They'll ask more appropriate questions in a more timely manner, expediting the whole process so that in turn you'll be placed in funds earlier. We report to the insurers, clearly requesting a decision on policy response as soon as is possible, but also we highlight to them along the process payment recommendations, but also policy items that need their view of, is it insured, and if so, to what value do they support it. We give them what we think it may be and highlight those areas for them, but it's ultimately, again, their decision. You guys can't see there, can you? Sorry. Salvage disposal. It's not something that comes up that often, but it's interesting all the same, where sometimes it's more effective to throw something away than to store it and bring it back again and reuse it. Whether it has a salvage value at that initial time will depend on the item. Oops. It's important at the outset to set up a separate control cost centre along with your record keeping of the damage and the reconciliation of it, because if it comes much later along with the total project and trying to separate it out, it's very time intensive and can lead to frustration. It can be done, it's usually not quite as accurate, but it's really important to set it all up at the outset. Establish a protocol for progress payments. What we like to do is make non-specific progress payments. There is damage, we've agreed the scope of damage, there's an estimated, you tell me it's X number of dollars. We go, that sounds about right. No, we're a little bit more creative than that. Not much. And we may well call in others to assist us in that, but we should place you in funds at the outset or very early on, and then be supporting payments the way through the journey. Where it gets slowed down is the lack of detailed information coming in to us, and then we have to involve others to assist us in that process and come back with more questions, so it just slows down the process. But ultimately, we want to make it as quick as possible. We don't like to delay payments. It's been suggested before that insurers like it because they can make money on the interest of the money that they're not paying. I really don't think that's a feature. Some policy areas not already canvassed. Loss, sudden and accidental physical loss or damage which is not excluded by the policy. It's not meant to pick up ordinary commercial risks such as winter weather. If there's a storm or a flood event, yes, but there is a commercial risk element there, so it's not all embracing. De minimis, is the damage, or is there damage, or is there, it's just so minimal, is an area that has arisen at various times. One of the key drivers is the functionality and the durability of the item affected. Has that been compromised? Warranties. Some policies won't cover them. Some are silent. Sometimes you can buy insurance for them. The basis of settlement. In the event of loss, the basis of any settlement will be, in the case of damage which can be repaired, the cost of repairs necessary to restore the property insured to its condition immediately before the occurrence of the damage. That rules out the betterment. Let's put it back to what it was before. What's not covered is any provisional repairs unless they constitute part of the final repair and hasn't increased the cost. However, you may have a temporary repair under the removal of debris cover. Sometimes you'll find it there, the make safe, and some of that may well fit under there if that's the case. And again, talked about betterment, alterations, additions or improvements. Professional fees. Professional fees, some of the areas that are likely to be insured include involving the professionals in correspondence with McLarens, coordinating the sub-trades for demo, temporary works, reinstatement works, quantity surveying, involved with the above work. Issuing progress claim requests. Engineering consultancy on cause investigation. Preparing the reinstatement scope and temporary works. No professional fees cover. Again, dependent on the wording. Re-evaluating the works program and deciding whether it's more economic for the project to reinstate the damage as expeditiously as possible or to effect temporary repairs to facilitate the continuation of the balance of the undamaged works. God, that was hard to read. So have you made a decision to go down an alternate route because overall project costs, financial project costs, are less than repairing it at the outset? Claim preparation costs are not recoverable, and fees incurred administering extension of time, conditions and changes to the program. Policy exclusions. Consequential loss, loss of use, loss due to delay, penalties, fines, liquidated damages, or aggravated punitive or exemplary damages. Quite wide-ranging in consequential loss area. And then liability arising from similar areas. But you can have potential insurance cover for advanced loss of profits, which will have a maximum indemnity period, a maximum amount of time that you're covered for. Could be 12 months after the project was due to complete. The advanced profits might incorporate loss of revenue, which is income losses arising from delay to an insured event. Additional costs of working, additional expenditure and increases in the cost of working in consequence of the delay for the purpose of avoiding or diminishing the loss of revenue, i.e. you spend more here to save more over there. There are those covers available. I was speaking to a broker saying, why is it not taken up more often? Because financial losses or consequential financial losses are only going to become greater as the value of money increases or the numbers go up. I was told that it's because his experience was that more detailed information is requested from the insurers, and that on his occasions that the client was unwilling to provide that extra information to them. And he wasn't sure whether it was because it was didn't want the financial information out there, or whether it was just too hard. His feeling was it was just too hard, and hence that's why it wasn't taken up more often. He did explain that he didn't think that the cost of obtaining the insurance are exhaustive. He thought it was quite reasonable, was his experience. You can get cover for warranties with some policies, it's in there, it is available. Others, you can also get profit element insured. So I guess that really what I'm saying is the insurance is wide ranging, there's subtleties throughout. I don't really expect anyone to understand it fully, as I don't. Each time I have to keep going back to the policy wording and checking the original contract documents just to check what was intended, how it's supposed to be set up, whether it has mirrored that, whether the information we have been provided is received in its entirety. So we shouldn't, in our role, we shouldn't be making lines in the sand if we don't know what the answers are. It's up to the insurers to advise us on that. And we should be using emotional intelligence and trying to understand your positions that you're in, what you need from us, There'll be a wide range of requirements and experiences and the uniqueness of projects, and we need to understand that as much as we can.